Hi, I'm Dr. Brad Musil, and welcome to Philosophy 143 Ethics. This is the first video for the course. Basically, I'll go through, introduce myself and then go through the course, kind of try to give you a general overview of what to expect in terms of the course in general, and then also what to expect kind of on a week-to-week basis, if you will. So that's the game plan here for the first video. I'll also talk about go through the syllabus in pretty good detail, and also go through the schedule that I provide, sort of how that works and how to interpret that. So again, that's the game plan here for the first video. I do want to apologize here at the outset for the quality of the videos I'm making. I was planning on making videos next time I taught this class on campus, where I'll probably have access to much better equipment and so on. But with the virus, I'm not sure when that's going to happen. So I figure, better to make this video, even though it might be of a lesser quality, than have no video at all. So again, wanted to throw that out there and apologize for. Again, I don't know how well you can, for example, see the marker board here, but I'm going to make do with what I have here. And without further ado, kind of proceed with what I had suggested I'd be doing. Kind of go ahead and introduce myself. We'll be spending a semester together or a course together, so I figure it would behoove us to kind of try to get to know each other a little bit better, and that's the impetus behind me introducing myself on in the forums as well, and I've asked you to do so as well. So who am I? Again, Dr. Brad Musil. I was born and raised in Kearney, Nebraska, a fairly small town, at least compared to Kansas City or Boston, the other two places I've lived. Kearney is a town of about 30,000 people. I always tell people that the first thing I wanted to do after I graduated high school was get as far away from my hometown and my parents as possible. But who was willing to foot the bill? The University of Nebraska at Kearney, less than a mile away from my parents. So even though I wanted to get out at an early age, I still spent, then my undergraduate career also in Kearney. So Kearney, Nebraska. Then we moved out to. I met my wife. So they say all things happen for a reason, so to speak. I met my wife though at the University of Nebraska at Kearney, and we moved out to Boston, where she has a law degree from Boston College, and I received my master's degree in philosophy from Boston College when we were out there. We were out there from 2003 to 2006. I like to mention my wife quite often in class because we kind of are polar opposites with respect to a lot of things. One example is, living in a big city versus a smaller city. She's much more the big city type person. She loved it living in Boston. I couldn't stand it. It was way too many people living in a very small, crowded area, in my opinion. So Kansas City is kind of a compromise. It was actually closer to a lot of our family too. We're both from the Midwest. She's from Omaha, Nebraska. So it was a lot closer to family and friends, and it's a lot more spread out versus Boston. So we live in Western Shawnee, which is on the outskirts of Kansas City. So that was sort of the driving force behind us moving back to the Midwest then back in 2006. And I enrolled in the PhD program at KU over in Lawrence and received my PhD after defending my dissertation there in 2014. So I have a master's degree and a PhD in philosophy. I like to mention that I had the good fortune of being kind of a world traveler at a very early age. My dad's business required a lot of travel, including to other countries, and so at a very early age, I was exposed to a lot of different sort of cultures and ways of looking at things, and I think that was pretty conducive to then a subsequent career in philosophy, where you're exposed to a lot of different, oftentimes conflicting viewpoints. So I'm sure there's many of you for whom that's true as well. You've done extensive travel, but I think again, and especially in a philosophy class, where you do have a lot of a lot of different views coming into the mix, I think it's helpful to have some sort of exposure already, right, to different ways of looking at things, and again, travel is kind of conducive to that. I've mentioned my wife. We've been married since August of 2004, so quite a while now, coming on, and actually, 5 days from when I'm recording this, it'll be 16 years. So we have 4 children, which keep us quite busy. 3 girls, Abigail, Sophia, and Zoe, and then a boy. Jack. And so I'm actually kind of daddy daycare typically during the day, oftentimes taking care of them. So I'll mention my phone number and email here in a little bit, but I just wanted to mention while I'm thinking about it that I oftentimes will be busy during the day if you try to contact me, but always leave a message and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. So I wanted to throw that out there. Another thing I'll mention is I have a terrible memory. So if I'm thinking of something, I've got to say it right away, otherwise I'll forget it. Okay, so I mentioned my history and philosophy. I will say again, mentioning my wife, right? She's kind of on the complete opposite end of the spectrum in terms of philosophy itself, right? Asking the deep questions. I'm the guy that sort of can't fall asleep at night because I think about these sort of deep questions, whereas she's of the mindset that there are no ultimate answers. So where does it get us to even question these sorts of things? And so I think it's kind of interesting that despite this sort of significant gulf, in terms of our outlook on philosophy, we're still, together and very happy and so on. And actually, that's sort of a nice segue to one of the things I wanted to mention for you guys, and that's that I realize that a lot of you are taking this course not because you might have wanted to, right, or you have an interest already in philosophy, but rather because you're marking something off the list, right? And so I recognize that, and so if you're maybe you're more of the mindset of my wife. I hope that I can still make the class enjoyable, right? And you still find some of these questions interesting and some of the issues we talk about interesting. And then obviously, I would like to, if maybe you didn't know you had an interest in philosophy, right, or ethics in particular. And so obviously, if you have some sort of innate interest that you didn't know was there, some latent interest, I'd like to spark that, right, obviously, with this course. So I guess what I meant to say with all that is I realize that a lot of you guys aren't here of your own accord, right? You're just marking something off the list. And in view of that, I think that nonetheless, or at least this is my hope, right, that you will find the course interesting, right? And then if you do have that deep-seated interest in philosophy buried there somewhere, maybe we'll make you more aware of that. At least that's the goal I have. I've also taught, in addition to J.C.C.C., where I've taught since the fall of 2007. So what is that? 13 years now. I've also taught a few other schools in the Kansas City area, including Rockhurst, University of St. Mary, and so on. So a few other little details about me, and then we'll move on here. I do like sports quite a bit. Grew up playing baseball, football, basketball. Started getting really into hockey for whatever reason in undergraduate. That's when I, was meeting my wife and back in Kearney, when I was 18, 19 years old. Started getting into hockey for whatever reason. And have really followed that more seriously the last 20 years. And for whatever reason, finally dove into it and started playing the adult leagues here. We're actually right down the road from one of the rinks here in Kansas City, and so started playing that a couple years ago, and have really enjoyed it. So play that every Sunday. The league I'm in plays their games, so I look forward to that. I do play guitar. There's actually a guitar right here, and many of them hanging on my wall over here. I picked that up out in Boston. Enjoy playing that when I get a chance. Unfortunately, that's not very often with 4 kids these days. I'm a big music fan. Of course, most of you are probably as well. In my humble opinion, it's all gone downhill since the classic rock era. So, I'm still jamming to Pink Floyd, The Doors, Led Zeppelin, so on and so forth. I guess last thing I mentioned, other than having a huge library that kind of comes with the territory, most philosophers I know love their books, and I've got stacks of books everywhere in here. I have a huge library out in my garage. The last thing I guess I'd mention is we really got into strategy board games here. My family and I did. I have a vivid memory of when my firstborn, when we brought her home. This is way back when I could play video games a lot more often, at least. Had her on my chest. She was taking a nap, and I was perusing. Back then it was Xbox Arcade, and came across a game called Settlers of Catan. Played it, became infatuated with it, and fell in love with these strategy board games. And so we have a huge library of strategy board games. I've created many myself. So that's kind of one of our hobbies around here as well. Okay, so probably way more about me than you'd ever care to know. I did mention, right, that I want you guys to introduce yourselves as well in the forum. I probably by the time you're seeing this or checking this out, I will have already posted, a very short introduction myself, in addition to the whole blurb you just heard here. So I'm looking for you guys to do something very similar. It doesn't have to be anything too extensive. Who are you? Do you have any weird idiosyncrasies? Any unique or interesting hobbies? what makes you interesting? If nothing else, where are you from? What's your major? Something to that effect, just to kind of get to know one another, because philosophy, I think, is one of those subjects where it really is helpful to feel comfortable with one another and to get to know one another as soon as possible. So, if we were taking this face to face, and this was day one, I would be then turning it over to you guys, and each one of you would be in class introducing yourself. And I know as a student, I hated that, but I think it's really important. Again, in philosophy, it's really good because it right away it makes us starts making us more comfortable with those around us, with whom we're going to have these pretty deep-seated discussions about issues, right, that are pretty significant, moral issues, that there's a lot of disagreement about. So we need to feel comfortable expressing our minds, and again, all of this is the reason why I have you guys introduce yourselves, say a little bit of something about yourselves, because we will be talking about issues that are pretty important to a lot of people, and there will be a lot of significant disagreements about these issues. Here you have a whole book, right, our textbook, um, where hardly any of these guys and girls agree about any of the issues that they'll discuss within this. So it's important, I think, that we feel as comfortable as possible, as early as possible, freely discussing what we think, right? And so again, that's the reasoning behind having you say a little bit something about yourself here at the outset. I mentioned that, so actually I was going to make sure I showed the textbook right. This is not optional. Okay, you need the textbook. Every semester, every time I teach the course, I get a whole slew of emails. Do we really need the textbook? Yes, you do. You can try to get by, taking the quizzes, having just reviewed the lecture notes, watched any videos I post, but it will be evident if you haven't actually done the primary reading, right? If you didn't actually read Hobbes, it will shine through, particularly in the essays. It's going to be quite obvious, and you will be downgraded for it. So you do need the textbook, and again, it's the one they mandated. The department does. They put it together. In my opinion, there are some things that could be better about it, but all in all, it's not a bad book, I think. And again, not one that I have really a choice about. So this is the book that we're working with. It does the job. We'll go through the schedule here in a little bit. It provides a nice survey of all the major facets of ethical philosophy. So what more could we ask for? That's again our textbook. I know it's not the cheapest thing, but in my experience, none of the textbooks seem to be cheap ever. So nothing I can really do about that. I want to talk about the syllabus here. Would be the next thing. So I did print this off again, you guys. I'm taking this from let's see, the last time I taught it, which was spring of 2020. But you'll have something similar, right, for your session. Probably very similar looking. The date or the semester will obviously be different. So this one's again spring 2020. Okay. But here you'll have a little blurb about me, including my contact info. So do not hesitate to call me day or night, 24/7. Some people think I'm crazy for giving out my cell phone like that, but if I'm sleeping, I won't have the phone next to me, and I'm kind of a night owl by nature. The odds that you call at 1 a.m. and that I answer are probably higher than you might think. And again, if I am sleeping, I won't have the phone anywhere near me, so you can literally call day or night, anytime, if you have a question or need something. Having said that, like I mentioned earlier, do note that I do oftentimes have my hands full with the 4 kids here, especially during the day. So if you have any questions about the course in general, about any of the particular material, some of this stuff is, not some of it, a lot of it is really dense, difficult material. These are some of the smartest guys and girls, in the history of humankind, right, that are writing some of these pieces, and we're going to then try to decipher what they're saying, and that can be very, very difficult, especially when they're talking about these deep philosophical issues. So no doubt you will probably have questions at some point. And again, if you do, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Or another thing I'd mention while I'm thinking about it is, make use of the forums, right? There are, I think I have a forum dedicated to each chapter where you can, freely voice any of the questions you might have. And that way, it's always fine if you're the type that would rather just, text or email me, privately, right? Or call me privately. But if you don't mind, right, if you have a question about something, odds are pretty good that at least one other person, if not many other people in the course, also have a similar question. So why not post it in the forum, right? That would be helpful for then all those other people as well. So if you have a question, don't hesitate to reach out one way or another, whether it's in private with just me via email or phone, or if you want to post it preferably I would say online so that then the whole class can benefit from our discussion. One way or another, don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions. Blah blah blah. There's information on the textbook, kind of a general course description. I'll let you read through that stuff at your leisure. Obviously, you're going to need to be very familiar with our course website, right? This is an online course, so everything we do is through the course website. Okay, so I provide a link in the syllabus for the course. How are you going to get the syllabus if you didn't already visit the link? So you probably already have the link. Grading. So obviously, this is a very important component of the syllabus and of the course in general for a lot of you. So let's take a few minutes here to discuss the grading components. Quizzes. Okay, this is going to be the most significant chunk of your grade, right? In fact, 90% of your grade is dictated by your scores on these quizzes. Okay, so how do the quizzes work? Well, basically, philosophy is a difficult enough subject. I've already intimated that several times here. So I try to compensate for the difficulty in a number of ways. One of the ways I try to do that is by not making the quizzes cumulative. So once we take a quiz, all the material that quiz was over, you won't have to worry about on the subsequent quizzes, right? So the part one quiz, after you take that part one quiz, okay, then you will not have to worry about any of that part one material anymore, right? Move on to part two, forget about part one. Okay, so the quizzes are not cumulative. Do note that. Basically, there are again 3 quizzes. Each quiz has the exact same format. So the final quiz isn't really your typical final quiz for us, right? It's just no different. In fact, I would argue that it's probably the easiest of all 3 of the quizzes or exams is that final one, the third one, and it's no different in structure. Again, it's not cumulative. So that is, I guess, one nice thing about the course, right, is that final exam is probably, compared to some of your other final exams, not going to be all that difficult. Anyway, so each of these quizzes, the structure itself, right, they're the same across all 3 of the quizzes. Each quiz is going to have 20 multiple choice questions, again, pertaining to the material in that section or that part, right? So the part 1 quiz will have 20 multiple choice questions pertaining to lectures 1 through 6, right, since those are the lectures that are in the first part, okay? So 20 multiple choice questions on those lectures. And then each quiz you will be tasked with writing 4 essays. Okay, so those 20 multiple choice questions are each worth 5 points for a total of 100 points. Okay, then the essays you'll have to write 4 of those, each worth 50 points. So that's a total of 200 points for the essays, plus the 100 points from the multiple choice. That means each quiz is worth 300 points. Okay, 300 points times 3 quizzes, that's 900 total points. Okay, the course in total is worth 1,000 points, right? So 900 out of 1,000, like I said earlier, that's 90% of your grade is determined by these quizzes. Okay? So if you have to, go ahead and rewind that. I know I went through quite a bit there in terms of the structure of the quiz. Again, 20 multiple choice questions, each worth 5 points. Okay, that's 100 points. Then you have 4 essays you have to write, each worth 50 points. So that's 200 points from that, plus the 100 points. Each quiz is worth 300 points. Now these essays, right? The way that's going to work is you will have a list. So you won't know what the list is until you take the quiz, okay? But then you'll have a list of topics to choose from, again, all pertaining to the stuff we studied in that section or part of the course. And you will need to pick, so there might be 6 or 7 of these topics listed, and you will need to pick 4 of these then and write on those 4. Now you will have the freedom to pick which 4, right? But you won't know what the list is until you come and take the quiz, right? But then you will have some flexibility there and some freedom in picking which 4 you want to write on. And so one thing I would mention is, let's say you're going into the part 1 quiz and you're feeling pretty weak on Hobbes. You didn't really understand what he was talking about. You didn't really get him. You can kind of bank on not having to write an essay on Hobbes, right? Now, there's probably one of the topics will be Hobbes, but you can kind of bank on not having to pick that one, right? You can pick 4 other ones. I will say, though, the multiple choice, there will always be questions in the 20 multiple choice questions pertaining to every lecture, right? So you can't avoid Hobbes in the multiple choice questions, but at least you can kind of, if you're strategizing in terms of how to best prepare, you can kind of bank on, like I said, avoiding 1 or 2, topics, if you will, going into into the quiz. Okay, so that's the quizzes. I will say while I'm thinking about it, make sure you're ready when you click ready to start, right? Because once you start, that's it, and you just have the 2 hours. There's no retakes. Okay, it doesn't matter what happened. I've had so many emails, so many different scenarios that students have approached me with. That's why I take pains to emphasize now, right at the outset of the course, that take it ahead of time, right? Be sure your computer isn't going to overheat, or at least to the best of your ability, right? I had a student recently who contacted me who had problems with her computer throughout the course, but yet still insisted on taking the final or part 3 quiz with the same computer, and of course it overheated. Okay, you know about this stuff. Be proactive. Turn in the homework, or not the homework, but the forum post, ahead of time. Don't wait till the last minute in case something comes up, right? You have to pick up a new shift at work. Okay, be proactive. Turn these things in slightly ahead of time. That way, if something does come up, right, or aim to turn them in ahead of time. That way, if something does come up, you'll still have, right, a buffer zone or some time to turn it in, even though your computer did overheat, right, or you had to pick up another shift. Okay, so I just wanted to mention that when you take the quiz, be ready, right? You have 2 hours at that point. Okay. All right, where was I? So we talked about the quiz. I talked about the structure. Okay, be ready to take it when you take it. The other thing, and I'll hammer this home here at another point a little bit later, do not copy the lecture notes in your essays. Don't paraphrase the lecture notes. Don't copy another website. Don't paraphrase another website. You will be downgraded significantly, and if you continue to do it throughout the course, on quiz 2 and quiz 3, it'll be worse and worse to the point where you'll get zeros. That's plagiarism. That's not what I'm going for. I'm not trying to test how well you can repeat what I've said in my lecture notes, right? I'm looking for an essay written by you. And again, I don't mean to sound like a jerk here at the outset, but there's a reason why I'm trying to hammer these points home, because it doesn't seem to matter. There will always be some students, no matter how many times I emphasize these points, right, that will still just copy the lecture notes, and they'll still wonder why, what else can they do? Why do they have why is their grade not as optimal as they, or not what they wanted? Well, because again, all you did was regurgitate what I said already in the lecture notes. Okay, so I always tell people when it comes to the quiz and taking the quiz, look, I know there's no way I can just ensure that you're not looking at the lecture notes, you're not looking at these other websites, but you're going to be better off not looking at the other stuff, right? Because it shines through. I can tell if generally if it's the student's own voice, or if it's some other website, or my own. Obviously, I can tell. So you're way better off, right? Even if you forget a bunch of stuff, you're way better off writing your own essay without looking at anything, because then I know you're owning it, right? It's your voice, it's you, and you have a command of it. I know that you actually understand the points. You're not just repeating what I said, right? You can explain it in your own words. That demonstrates an actual understanding of it. That's going to be way better than if you would hit every single point but just copy, right, what I was saying. That's not good at all. So again, do not copy, the lecture notes or other websites when you're writing these essays. Write your own essays, okay? So that's what I wanted to say on the quizzes. The other 10% of your grade, right, 100 points out of the 1,000 total points. There's 1,000 total points in the course, right? Right here, if you can see that somewhat well up here, it says 1,000 total points. So we talked about how 900 of those points are from the quizzes, right? The 3 quizzes each were 300 points, so that's 900 total points. The other 100 points then are from these forum discussion posts, okay? And the way that works are there's 18 lectures in the course, 6 for each part of the course, right? So 6 in part 1, 7 through 12 then in part 2, and then 13 through 18 in part 3. And so for each of these 18 lectures, you'll be required to, by a certain time, and we'll go through the schedule here, right? It'll always be listed on the schedule when each lecture post is due. You'll be required to go online in our forums and post in the appropriate forum response to one of the questions in the lectures. And so one thing while I'm thinking about it that I'll mention is these posts, right? One tendency students have when they go in. So you'll see that at the end of the lecture, there's like 3 reflection questions that I've listed. What a lot of students will have a tendency to do is just write a quick 1 or 2 sentence, response to each of those questions. That's not what I'm looking for. I want a substantive response, right? Pick and focus on one of the questions and, analyze it more thoroughly, right? Defend your position or whatever side you take on the question or the issue. Defend it, right? Give your reasons. Offer a more robust, more robust post on that one question rather than just a few, insignificant remarks on all the questions. Okay, so sorry, while I'm thinking about that, I wanted to mention that. So you'll be tasked with, again, writing a response to one question for each of the 18 lectures. Okay, and each of those is going to be worth 5 points, and they're pretty easy points. I mean, as long as you do what you're asked to do, right? Just write a substantive response. And you can also respond to what somebody else has said, as long as it's a substantive sort of response. And I give examples of that in the syllabus. As long as you do that, 5 points. Pretty easy, 5 out of 5. If you offer a very short, flippant 2-sentence remark, or I've had this happen too, people copying things for the discussion, right? They'll copy a website. That's a 0. Again, I mean, you could even be removed from the course for that. There's no excuse for plagiarism at this level. By and large, though, your own opinion, you can't be wrong, right? And you defend it as best you can, substantively. That's 5 out of 5, pretty easy. So that's 18 posts for each, one for each lecture. And then in addition, at any point throughout the course, you need to offer 2 additional posts, right? And those can be on any of the lectures. They'll have to be on different questions, right? So let's say you pick lecture 4 to do your first additional post on. It can't be the same question that you answered originally for your lecture 4 post, right? It has to be a different one. And again, on each lecture, there's several questions, right? So for those 2 additional posts, okay, you can pick, again, any lecture, and you have to respond to a different question in that lecture than you already responded to for the lecture-specific post. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, this is delineated at much more length in the syllabus. So if you're still kind of confused about it, take a look at the syllabus, and you can always reach out to me, obviously, as well. But hopefully that's pretty clear. And again, I do give you examples in the syllabus of, what a substantive comment or post looks like versus what a non-substantive comment would look like. Okay, that's that. So how many discussion posts? Not 18, right, but 20. And I mentioned how, right, focus on answering the one thoroughly. Okay, you can answer the other ones too, right? But typically the people that are answering several questions, they are offering very brief responses to each one. Okay? You can always do more than what's required, right? But to do what's required, you need to at least answer one in a focused, thorough manner. Okay? I will say again, kind of reiterate how important it is to sort of try to elicit as comfortable an environment as possible in our forums, right? Because we're talking about a lot of touchy subjects. So stay respectful, and I can't even tell you the last time I had an issue with this, but I think it's always a good idea to try to hammer this point home, especially in an ethics course right at the outset. Just to remind everybody, stay respectful, because we won't all agree on these topics throughout the course. There will be many disagreements, but again, keep it respectful, and I think you'll find that you as well as others will feel more and more comfortable than freely expressing sort of how you feel about these different topics we talk about. Talked about the quiz already. Again, don't copy the lecture notes or other resources. Just don't do it. I think the last thing I'll do then is just talk about sort of the course in general, sort of how it's structured, and then kind of give you an idea of what to expect on a more day-to-day or week-to-week basis as well. So I kind of already hinted at a lot of this, right? The course in general, and again, this isn't the right semester for you, obviously, but most of this will stay the same. Okay. The schedule, usually as I print it out, if you want to print it out yourself, will fit on one page, one piece of paper, both sides. So the first part, or there's 3 parts. Okay. go through the first part, then we take a quiz, right? Then we start with the second part of the course, go through that, take a quiz. Now, as we're going through these different parts, a couple weeks pass when, so let me give you, zoom in here, or try to show you here. Let's look at this here, right? Under the date, the idea is by that date, you need to have whatever's listed under that date done. So parentheses 3, moral conventionalism, that's the title of the lecture. That's lecture 3. And what that means, if there's anything in parentheses after that, which there is here, right, you need to have done that reading by that date. Okay, that's the expectation, is you do the readings by that date. And then similarly, right, fast forward here, go forward a week or whatever the date is here, you can see in bold here that we have a forum post due. Okay, so what that means is by that date, you need to have whatever lectures it indicates there, those forum posts posted by midnight of that day. Otherwise, it'll be a 0. Right? And then same thing then with the quiz. Okay, it has to be completed, not started, completed by the date indicated. It will shut off, right? You'll be forced to close at 12 that day, right? Or 11:59 and 59 seconds, or whatever. You get the idea, right? Make sure you're starting at, don't wait till the last second, ideally, right? Do it ahead of time. But the very last second you possibly could, right, to get the whole 2 hours would be 10 o'clock. So I would not recommend that. Okay, do it ahead of time. Save you and me headaches, believe me. But then the same exact thing for part 2. Then, right, we just move on to part 2. Okay, you have dates. You got to do the readings by the dates that they're under. Okay, then you have a part 2 quiz. Okay, with the forum posts scattered throughout that are due as well. Okay, and then the same exact thing for part 3. That's really all there is to it. Again, with the final quiz, it's really not a final quiz. It's just no different than any other quizzes, right? It's just the part 3 quiz, and it'll just be over this material, right? The final, 6 lectures. So I think that's pretty much it in terms of our introduction to the course, to the schedule, a review of our syllabus. You kind of got to know me, probably heard way more about me again than you'd ever care to know. And again, I look forward to hearing a little bit about you guys. Make sure you post in a little bit of an introduction about you. And I look forward to getting to know you more thoroughly as well through your discussion forum posts. Those are always pretty interesting. Don't forget, if at any point you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, phone number or via email. Those are listed in the syllabus. Should be also somewhere on the website as well. And just in case, here it is. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and end this first video. The next video, what we're going to do is talk a little bit about ethics, right, and what it is, right? We're here for ethics. Well, what is ethics? Let's talk about what ethics is. Not only that, but let's back up, right? Ethics is a branch of philosophy. Well, what's philosophy? So no matter what the intro course is that I'm teaching, I like to start with this general sort of introduction to philosophy. So I'll talk about the history of philosophy, and then also I like to give a kind of categorical breakdown of philosophy as well. So you get a little bit of that in our first lecture, and then we'll sort of zoom in and talk about ethics itself, right? What we're going to be spending the rest of the semester or course on, and we'll talk a little bit about the structure of ethics and what we're going to be getting into in general when it comes to ethics. And so that's the game plan in terms of that first lecture. And then the second lecture, I also like to do, no matter what intro level class I'm teaching, is a little bit on logic. And so lecture 2, we'll talk about the basics of logic, because no matter what aspect of philosophy you're talking about or discussing, you're dealing with arguments. And so logic is the study and analysis of arguments, basically. And so we need to know, right, as we're reading what John Stuart Mill's telling us about morality, right, that we always ought to do whatever promotes the greatest happiness for the greatest number. We need to know how to analyze his arguments. Should we be buying that conclusion? Should we be signing up for utilitarianism? Well, how do we analyze what he's saying, right? How do we know if what he's saying is convincing, or how to go about thinking about those sorts of things? And logic is going to help us deal with that sort of thing. So that's typically what's on tap then for the next session, right, or those 2 lectures. So that's why I sort of alluded to what's going to happen in those. And I will say, why are we here? Ethics, right? What is ethics? Again, we're all sort of familiar, right, with these notions of right and wrong and good and evil. But what we're going to do, right, for the semester, for the course, is do a little bit more thinking about those terms, right? We hear them all the time, and no doubt many of us use them all the time. No doubt, probably on an everyday basis, right? On an everyday basis. But what do we mean when we say Sally was so wrong to have done that, right? What do we mean? How do we know that she was so wrong to have done that, right? What gives us the right to say that sort of thing, to make that sort of judgment? And that's really what the course is all about, right? How figuring out what gives us that sort of right, or how to figure out what in fact is right and what in fact is wrong, if in fact there is such a thing, right? Because we'll see there are some who would suggest that morality is nothing but an illusion, and there is no such thing as right and wrong. So we'll leave it for you to decide, who ultimately is right. Okay? Uh, if there is such a thing as right and wrong, and if there is, who ultimately is right. That's what we're going to try to figure out in this course. So again, Philosophy 143 Ethics. I'm Dr. Brad Musil, and I hope you enjoy the course henceforth. Thanks.